Hey, Snackers, this is Kareem Scanner.
Hey everyone, Matt the Napoli here.
Welcome to what episode was this? 189? 188?
Yeah.
Welcome to episode of well okay, let's just do it seriously. Welcome to episode 188 of Snack Minute.
This week we're doing a classic Kareem and Matt episode. These are becoming fewer and far between.
And I miss those.
Yeah, I miss them too. But it's good. We got a lot of good information and from the other people that come on. But the one thing, the reason we're doing this at Kareem and Matt episode is that we're actually starting in on a topic that probably a lot of you have heard of. It's been the biggest word in AI since the beginning of the calendar year. We're going to be talking about MCP, or Model Context Protocol, and Kareem actually has some cool implementation he wants to show us. So Kareem, can you kind of intro and let's talk about what MCP is to you, and then we'll see your demo and do all the cool stuff we usually do in a classic Kareem and Matt episode.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been playing with MCP for a little bit because I think it's one of those protocols that are super relevant to what we do as network engineers and automation engineers.
Yeah.
I don't want to dive too deep into what MCP is, but think of it as kind of like the USB port of your laptop or your computer. It's for the LLM. So it's like a USB port. You can plug something in to the model, and you allow these tools that are, you make them available to your model. So you're bypassing having to retrain your model on your data set, not having to use things like RAG as a service. This allows the LLM to have access to your data. And in that case, this is something that is close to us, Matt, is you're making API endpoints available for whatever service you have to the LLM to access your data on demand. And it's really cool, and it's super simple to get started with. I wrote a couple of blogs around how to get started with MCP and a specific use case on, allowing your model, your agent to self-heal your network configuration. And that write-up is out there. But in the recent, and what I want to focus on today is in the recent update to MCP, the Anthropic have introduced, and this was probably about 2 months ago. They have from the time this episode is recorded, they've introduced the ability to basically bring in your OpenAPI specs as
That's awesome.
At the entire spec into MCP, and allowing you to basically spin up an MCP server with those API specs. So you can actually start releasing MCP servers that are ready for the enterprise. That takes away a couple of, and you know this, Matt, like when we were building out the documentations for developer.cisco.com, OpenAPI specs have been a huge helper for us. Because we have access to that, we can actually just feed it in, and I'll show you how to do that. But there's a really, really useful use case. We talk a lot about agentic ops, right? Being able to operationalize your network and have agents on your network to control things, right? And part of that is being able to have access control. So you don't want to just open up your network to a user that's going to use a specific agent without making sure that that user has the right privileges.
Before we get into the privilege aspect of this, I just want to do a quick summation to make sure that I'm on the same page as you, and that our snackers are following along as well. So we kind of used the acronym MCP very loosely. I mentioned that it was Model Context Protocol. It was actually put out by Anthropic, who, correct me if I'm wrong, puts out the Claude LLMs.
That's correct.
This isn't necessarily a standard, but it's becoming the accepted standard across the industry for building out these types of software applications that we call MCP servers. In this instance, we can provide access to different kinds of documents, different kinds of artifacts. But for us, and this is where I want to make clear for our snackers, Kareem, for us, this is almost an API into an API for us. So we have this ability to build out these agents leveraging these MCP servers that then have access to the APIs that Cisco platforms offer up. And the quickest way to build these servers on our side, what Kareem is noting today, is that we can just pop in these OpenAPI specs. And just for clarity, any OpenAPI spec that's on developer.cisco.com can be downloaded and made as part of a build out for an MCP server that ties into that. So did I get all that correct? Anything wrong on there, Kareem?
You're spot on.
Okay.
It's a layer on top of the APIs. It's a wrapper on top of the APIs. They are defined, those API endpoints that you care about are in MCP. They are defined as tools, and these tools are now available as part of your MCP client. And one thing to also note here is we're talking MCP server. The MCP protocol itself is a server client RPC kind of protocol, right? Which means you build a server, you have some type of client that has access to that server. Within that server, it has access to the tools that you've defined, and it does something with it, right? And so the client could be Claude desktop, it could be Chat GPT desktop, it could be a Python client that you wrote and could have access to these tools. So that's kind of in a nutshell what MCP is, where we're using it, that use case that we have. But if we dive into the code real quick, Matt, here, so there is a library out there, Python library specifically, called Fast MCP. This is what allows you to essentially instantiate an MCP server, and you go about the usual. You instantiate a client with HTTPX. This is telling the MCP server that this is where the endpoints are going to be at, and then I'm going to dive into the routes here after, but I want to show you how cool and easy this is. So I chose instead of linking to the OpenAPI specs on developer.cisco.com, I just like you said, I went to DevNet and I downloaded the specs for the latest specs for Meraki. And with Meraki, you have really well schema here, really well formatted schema that you use. Everybody has access to this. And I literally simply went and said, okay, Fast MCP, go ahead and open that file, bring it in as part of the OpenAPI spec method for that server, and that's it. It's literally, and just run the server.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
And that makes that allowed me to have my agent, my client, have access to every single endpoint in Meraki. So if I show you, for instance, here, I'm going to open up my Claude and I'll bring it in here and I'll show you something. So this is my MCP server. Right now it's filtered, but I'm not going to filter on the endpoints. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you every single endpoint that's available in the spec. Right now I have it filtered because I don't want my LLM to have access to all 855 endpoints that Meraki APIs has. Okay.
Right.
So if I go here and I say my route maps, and this is where the route concept comes in play, and I'll talk about this, but I want to show you how easy it is first. So here's my unfiltered routes. And if I go to my Claude desktop real quick and restart it, I just made available under my Meraki MCP server. Now it has 840
tools,
API endpoints.
Yeah. Okay.
Which they should be familiar. They look familiar to you. You've supported Meraki APIs, and
these all are tied to the endpoint name. Yep. Correct.
So now at this point, granted it's massive, and probably there's limitation from Claude's side. But if you're writing your own client, you can have access to all of this. But you just made the entire API, Meraki API, available for the model,
right?
And you can start chatting with the agent and taking action, right? Now, that's not what we really want to do. We want to kind of build these API endpoints based on use cases. If you look at getting started with AI in general, it's good practice to define your first step is to define your use case. What is your agent going to do for you? And then start building on it. And in my case, I want to be able to, which is something that we know could be of a pain. I want to be able to look at all of my organizations in Meraki. I want to provide two personas access: my NOC team access to the devices in every single organization to make sure that the devices can fit, the device firmware is up to date for everything that I'm managing. And I also want to provide a read-only access to the API endpoints that are relevant for the sysadmin to be able to just pull out reports to say which devices are out of compliance, which devices need to be updated, and pull that report for me. This is something that if you're managing multi-sites, massive organizations, multi-organizations, it's going to be a pain in the butt to just go around and having to do all of that, right?
Right.
You know this, Matt, firsthand.
Yeah.
So with the route concept in MCP server itself, I can actually go in and define my route maps. So I have two personas. I have a NOC routes, and you can talk for this, right? And if I want to be able to see the firmware upgrades and be able to update them, which endpoints would I need to open up to the LLM?
So, well, I mean, you're doing, so when you're working with Meraki APIs, you have to kind of chain the calls to identify the organization ID, to pass that to the network ID, to pass that to the devices SKU, actually, or whatever the identifiers that we call it now. And then that should be able to tie to the firmware, but you have to make a chain of API calls to do that. But what you're showing right here is taking all of that work off of I don't have to write any code now. I can expose the pattern to the LLM and it'll figure out how to chain. Is that what we're getting at here?
Exactly. So you're spot on.
Wow.
So I've exposed, but I didn't, because I'm using route maps with this API spec, I actually just used regex to say whatever under organizations and it ends with networks, make it available. Whatever under organization endpoints with device that ends with devices, make it available. I also made available firmware and I made available licenses just to see if I get any licensing issues as part of that. Because you can't really update any firmware or do any API calls if your organization is not compliant. It's not
licensed. Yeah.
So, but then the difference is because I'm a NOC persona, I can go in and say I have firmware upgrade put rights, so I can actually execute. But then if I'm a sysadmin, I only have get access. So that allows me to create an ACL essentially, and the firehose just basically brings in everything. This is what I just showed you.
Yeah, and then the regex piece there fills in the blanks for the dynamic aspects of the URL, which are the IDs for each of those layers that I just talked about earlier. Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly. And look at my MCP configuration here real quick before we actually prompt and use this. If I look at my MCP configuration on my screen here, now as part of my MCP config file, I'm actually injecting the role as part of the environment variables. So now in this case, when my MCP server runs next time, and I need to go actually update my code because I've changed it to show you real quick. Here it needs to say selected routes. If I go to Claude and restart this, my client, now you could see, Matt, that and Snackers, you could see that now I have only 5 endpoints, 5 tools available for my MCP server, which is get organization, devices, firmware, license, networks, and update network firmware. So it has access to these tools now, those endpoints, and I can do something like this. I can write a really simple, properly formatted prompt that says, okay, your name is Network Pharaoh, and you're an agent, and you have full administrative visibility. You are part of a NOC team, and I want you to go and essentially tell me and make recommendations on which firmware, which devices for every single organization I'm managing. I'm managing like 7 to 8 organizations, so I'm just limiting it for the sake of this demo to just my Cisco U org. And I can also tell it like these are the values I care about from the API endpoint. This is really important. We talk about being safe and have a responsible AI, I'm telling it, put human in the loop. So I don't want it to go upgrade and update my firmware. I want it to actually come back with recommendation and wait for clear human in the loop to approve before making any changes. So these are my rules to it. So if I execute this, first of all, the client is going to know that it has access to a Meraki MCP server. So it's going to go here and it's going to get organizations. I'm not going to show you the response because it has all my org IDs for every single organization I'm managing. But it got the organization. It found the specific Cisco U one, and it told me that's the ID for it.
Okay.
And then now it's trying to get organization networks. It's really cool because, and then this is on purpose. Part of the having an agent in there is if it fails, it's gonna keep using all the tools that you made available to it to fix any issues it runs into. Now, part of the schema itself that Meraki has, and this is why it's failing, is there are some fields that are missing. So there's a validation that happens to the output, and that fails. So it stops, but it used other endpoints and access endpoints to find information, and this is what it came back with. So it said, this is my network, and these are the devices that I have access to in my network. The firmware version is here. It needs to go to there. And it came back with a recommendation on when to update. It also did some more device level analysis, critical recommendations on the upgrades. And then finally, at the end, it's actually telling me, because I specified this, yes, please upgrade device type and network. So it's waiting for my prompt to allow it to upgrade. So you see how really cool this is. It's a simple use case. And I didn't have to write anything to get this started.
Exactly. And so the code level interaction, to me, that's the amazing part, because now you have this capability of building these agentic elements very quickly based on API spec. That's bananas to me. You don't have to worry as a network engineer who's like familiar with coding but not super comfortable with it. You don't have to write any of the scripts anymore, which is kind of cool. I don't want to gloss over the fact that the prompt, though, did have to go through probably some significant engineering, Kareem. But that being said, it was in natural language, and you can kind of work through iterations a little bit more quickly than you would have to in code, because you're not going back and re-implementing something or debugging within an IDE and kind of resetting the service there. So I could see where something like this, especially once you get the prompt sorted, could be incredibly helpful once you wrap your head around it. This is really, really cool.
Yeah, and you can put this on automation, right? So I have a prompt here, but if you're a sysadmin and you want this use case to run monthly, for instance, I could automate that where I can just have the agent go out and do it without me having to prompt it,
Right,
as part of a simple automation script. So the use case here is infinite, but the underlying technology where take the spec, build a server out of your spec, and put ACLs around your endpoints, that is massive. And that's the value proposition of this here.
Yeah, that's amazing. Kareem, I would love to dig into more details, but unfortunately we're at time. I think we're going to have a few more jumps into the deep end on this one because I'm intrigued. Snackers, keep an eye out for Kareem's content on MCP servers, and especially being able to leverage the API specs for network management tasks. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Snappers.